All right, let's dive into one of the most fundamental choices you can make in data analysis, understanding the difference between dependent and independent samples. Now, I know it sounds super technical, but getting this one thing right is absolutely crucial. Get it wrong, and your whole study could basically fall apart.
So, picture this. You've done all the hard work, right? You ran the survey, you've got all your numbers in a spreadsheet, but now what? Are you 100% positive that the statistical test you're about to use is the right one for your data? Because this isn't just a matter of preference. And I'm not exaggerating here. The entire validity of your conclusions, whether you're working on a PhD thesis or a critical business report, it all hinges on correctly identifying your sample type right from the get-go.
To make this crystal clear, let's just walk through a really simple, relatable example. We're going to take one research question, but we'll tackle it with two totally different study designs.
It's a great question, isn't it? I mean, we all feel like they do, but how would you actually go about proving that with data? Well, you decide to create a survey to measure people's stress levels. But the real magic is in who you survey and when.
Okay, check this out. Over on the left, you've got Study A. We find 50 people who are about to head out on vacation, and we measure their stress. Then we find 50 completely different people who just got back from a trip, and we measure their stress. See that? Two totally separate, unrelated groups. Now look at Study B on the right. Here, we measure the stress of 50 people, they go on their trip, and then we track down those exact same 50 people and measure their stress again when they get back.
Just think about that for a second. The data from Study A comes from 100 different individuals. But the data from Study B, that comes from just 50 people, but we measure them twice. And believe me, that difference is everything.
All right, let's put a name to what we were doing in that first approach. Study A, with its two separate groups of people, that is a perfect textbook example of what we call an independent sample design.
The official definition is pretty straightforward. The data from one group has absolutely no relationship to the data from the other. The key word here is unrelated. The stress level of some random person in the before group tells you nothing, literally nothing, about the stress level of another random person in the after group. They are totally independent of each other.
So yeah, our Study A fits this bill perfectly. Another classic example you see all the time is comparing the average income of one group, say men, to a completely separate group, like women. As long as the people in the groups don't overlap, those samples are independent.
Okay, so what about that second approach, Study B, where we went back to the same people? Well, that introduces us to a really powerful concept, dependent samples.
And this is where it gets really cool. The measurements in dependent samples are related, or you'll often hear them called paired. And why are they paired? Well, because they come from the same person at two different times, or maybe from subjects that are connected in a meaningful way, like a husband and wife or twins. And this is so powerful. By measuring the same person twice, you get to control for all their unique individual quirks, their baseline stress level, their personality. You're isolating the effect of just the holiday itself.
And that brings us right back to our holiday stress Study B. For every single person in that study, you have a pair of scores. You've got a before score and an after score. Those two numbers aren't independent at all. They're linked because they belong to the same exact person.
This before and after design is one of the most common ways to do it. But honestly, once you start looking for it, you'll see this idea of paired data pop up everywhere in research.
For instance, a classic before and after is measuring a patient's pain level before and after something like knee surgery. Or maybe you're comparing conditions, where you have the same group of baseball players test an old bat and then a new one to see which works better. It doesn't even have to be the same person. You could survey married couples where each husband's response is naturally paired up with his wife's.
Okay, so we've got the two types down: independent, separate groups, dependent, paired, or related measurements. But so what? Why have we spent all this time on it? What is the big deal?
Here it is. This is the whole ball game. This is why it all matters so much. The choice between independent and dependent samples isn't just some tiny detail you write down. It's a huge fork in the road that sends you down two completely different paths with completely different sets of statistical tools. And that fork in the road leads to two very different toolkits for analyzing your data. So let's take a look at what's actually inside those toolkits. And here they are.
For your independent samples, your separate groups, you use tests that are built to compare the averages between those groups, like an independent t-test. But for your dependent data, you've got to use tests that are specifically designed to look at the difference between the paired scores, like a paired t-test. The math happening behind the scenes is totally different for each because the very structure of the data is different.
And listen, you absolutely cannot mix and match these. Applying a test from that independent column to your paired data, or the other way around, isn't just a small boo-boo. It fundamentally breaks the rules of the test, and you could end up drawing conclusions that are just flat out wrong.
So if there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's that you have to understand the structure of your sample before you even think about doing any analysis. It's that critical first step to choosing the right tool for the right job and making sure your findings are actually correct and meaningful.
So the next time you're reading a news article about some new study or looking at a report at work, just ask yourself, did they survey the same people twice or two different groups? Because now you have the framework to spot the difference and to really think critically about whether their conclusions hold up.